We are currently in a series where I am talking about the 8 habits for highly significant leaders. Today I'm going to talk about habit number 2, which is self-awareness. The ancient Greeks said, know thyself. In fact, I've mentioned before, research has shown that the single greatest predictor to success is, you guessed it, self-awareness. But here's the issue with self-awareness. I want to do a little test with you. This is something I've asked to groups before that I've gotten the opportunity to speak to. Do you think you're self-aware? Raise your hand. Most people, by the way, raise their hand, 90-something%. Now, keep your hand up if you know somebody who's not self-aware. Most people, when I ask this, they keep their hand up. And then a lot of times I'll say something funny like, is that person in this room? But here's what I find interesting. Most people think they're self-aware, but most people know somebody who's not self-aware. So what if you're that person who's not self-aware? You see, we've got to change our thinking around self-awareness. It's not something that's all or nothing. Self-awareness, it's a process. It's something we grow in. I heard a really cool story about the statue of David that was created by Michelangelo. So the legend goes that somebody came up to Michelangelo and asked him, how did you turn this piece of marble into this unbelievable, very lifelike statue? Michelangelo kind of shrugged it off and just simply said, well, the marble was already in the image of David. I just chiseled away the pieces that weren't. It's a little bit like self-awareness. You see, our goal is that over time, every month, every week, hopefully every day, we are chiseling away pieces of who we are. And over time, we get a clearer picture. We're never going to arrive to the full picture, but our goal is to get as close to that picture as possible. So it's not something that we arrive in, it's something that we grow in. So how do we develop this habit of self-awareness? Well, first off, here's what it means to be self-aware. You know your strengths, your weaknesses, and your blind spots. So how do we grow in this habit? Well, first off, we have to start with our strengths. The goal is to refine our strengths. We want to get the most out of them because they are going to give us the best return on our investment. So those strengths that you have, and you can use assessments like Gallup has a great one with their Strengths Finder 2.0. You can use personality assessments like the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs, but find out what your top strengths are and then do the hard work to take it from like a 7 to an 8 or for an 8 to a 9. Spend most of your time focused on your strengths. Now, with our weaknesses, we want to compensate for our weaknesses. I have something I got to tell you, and you're probably not going to like it. Your weaknesses will never become strengths. They just won't. But if we're not careful, our weaknesses can distract from our strengths. They can hinder us from being successful. So what we want to do is we want to compensate for them. We want to get them to average, to par. You know, I have an interesting story. When I was playing college basketball at Oklahoma Wesleyan University, my strength was my jump shot, my mid-range jump shot. It was probably the thing that I was the best at. My biggest weakness, which is kind of ironic because I was a point guard, was dribbling. And it really got exposed in college because guys were just faster. They were quicker. You had to have better handles. And my first year, oh my gosh, I struggled. And the problem was because I was struggling with dribbling, it affected my jump shot. I couldn't get into it at all. So over the off season, I had to work really, really hard to be able to get my dribbling to par. I was never going to be an expert when it came to handling the ball, especially at a collegiate level. But I had to give it to par so it wouldn't distract from my main strength, which was the jump shot. Compensate for your weaknesses. And then finally, we want to minimize our blind spots. We want to bring them out into the open. All a blind spot is a weakness that we don't know about. So that's why we want to be able to minimize them. Marion Jones, you might remember her. She was a famous track and field athlete in the early 2000s. She won lots of medals at the Olympics. In fact, she won a gold medal. The problem is that most of them got stripped away. She took performance-enhancing drugs. She lied to Congress. She had to go to prison for a little bit. About a month before she was going to be released from prison, she gave an interview. And in that interview, she was asked, how did you go from not taking drugs to taking drugs? Like what was that point that you went to? Here's what she said. She said, I stopped hanging out with people who would tell me like it is, and I started associating with people who would just pat me on the back and say, good job. Have people in your life who will hold you accountable, who will show you tough love, and will share with you those blind spots so that you can unearth them and bring them into the light. Okay, so we want to refine our strengths, compensate for our weaknesses, and minimize our blind spots. Here's our game plan moving forward so that we can turn this into a habit. Here's what I want to encourage you to do. Take some time over the next week, and I want you to list out your top 5 strengths. So what are your top 5 strengths? And then also list out your top 3 weaknesses. After you do that, I want you to find at least 3 people. 5 would be best, but at least 3 people who you trust, who know you, and then ask them the same question. Have them share what your top 5 strengths are and then what your top 3 weaknesses are. Don't show them your sheet yet. Once you get all of them, compare. What are some of the strengths that you wrote down, but that other people wrote down as well? What are some of those common themes? That will let you know some of your key strengths that you can refine. In the same way, what are some of your common weaknesses? That will let you know those weaknesses you need to compensate for. And then, with those people, ask them one more question. What is one blind spot? What is one area of my life that if I'm not careful about, it will hinder my opportunity for success? It will hurt my ability to be a leader. That will allow you to see some blind spots that now that you have brought to the light, that you can then start compensating for them because they become weaknesses. Let me leave you with our tweetable lesson. It's from Socrates. The unexamined life is not worth living.